Good morning. Good morning if you are joining us live, and hello if you are watching back. My name's Zoe. I am Zoe Thompson from Phoenix Life and Wellbeing Coaching. Welcome to our series of Fire 5 at Phoenix. So this has been going for a little while now, and each month we have a different topic. And this month our topic is managing emotions. So we've had a different guest each week, and each week those guests come in with 5 questions that they get to fire at me that I haven't seen before we go live. So this week I am joined by lovely Amanda Gallagher from Children's Hospice Southwest. So Amanda, welcome. Thank you so much for your time joining me this morning. Tell us a little bit about you and who you work for and the amazing work that you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me, Zoe. So pleased to be here. So like you said, I work for Children's Hospice Southwest and I'm the corporate fundraiser there. We have 3 hospices across the Southwest and we support around 500 families that have a child or children with a life-limiting condition. So usually we do this from one of our 3 hospices, but at the moment in COVID times, we are going out to families to see them in their own homes and provide support remotely and virtually and however we can. It's such a rewarding role, such an amazing charity to be part of. And I kind of have to pinch myself some days to believe that I'm doing this for a job. So yeah, absolutely love it and can't imagine working for anyone else.
I think it's just such incredible work that you do, and I think a lot of people they know the sort of frontline staff and frontline team who are supporting the families, but you and your colleagues in those other supporting roles just play such an important part, especially at the moment, keeping your charity going, and because it's such important work, isn't it? I mean, 500 families, and that's just in the Southwest.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's over 50 children's hospices across the UK that all work very similarly to Children's Hospice Southwest. Obviously, I am biased because because this is the best charity, but they all do amazing work and they all support families across the country. But in terms of like talking about managing emotions, it's such a great topic to be part of because I always feel like it is the care team that are at the forefront, like you say, and working with those families. And actually, they couldn't do what they do without us being here to raise the money and make sure that they can be here. But I feel like we're kind of slightly removed from that that direct contact with the families, although we do hear family stories, we hear amazing examples of how our care team are working with families. But I feel like it's easier for us to manage our emotions and that side of things because we are one step back. I'm quite an emotional person anyway, so I'll cry at Coronation Street. I'm not embarrassed. I'm slightly embarrassed, but I have cried at Coronation Street. But actually, when people say children's hospice and they think, how on earth can you work at a children's hospice? Isn't it incredibly sad? No, it's incredibly happy because it's all about making positive memories and helping those families to make the most of that time they've got with their child.
And I love that. And I went for a walk with a friend at the weekend, and we were talking about, weirdly, I'm not quite sure how it came up in conversation, but we were talking about, if, when it's your time, as an adult, we can quite often say that we feel we've lived the life that we wanted to live. But, if we had a certain amount of time left, the things that we would want to do. And I just think it's so lovely that you and your teams get to be a part of, making those memories for those families. And yeah, I know that every time I hear you talk about the work that you do, you're so incredibly passionate about it. And I think, it's always nice, isn't it? That whole, do a job that you enjoy and it doesn't feel like work. But I think that there's that the passion in the work that you do is just comes through really, really, really strong.
Well, that kind of leads me really nicely into my first question, actually. It feels like it was set up, but obviously you don't know what I'm talking about. So,
No.
but since I started at the charity, and I'm sure other fundraisers feel the same, I always feel like if I just do this one application, or if I just speak to that one extra company, that could be transformational for the charity, and it could be that one that makes the difference. How would you suggest like finding and trying to get that balance of actually, no, you have to switch off now. You have to like step back.
It's just really tough, isn't it? And I think that there's probably lots of people in lots of different jobs who feel very similar. I know from my background in the police that being able to log off and walk away at the end of the day, and it's a bit easier for us in that we know we're handing on to the next team who are going to pick that up and keep it going. Whereas what you're describing there is closing down and coming back to it the next day. And I think the logical side of my brain is saying, that if you come back to it the following morning and you're refreshed and you've had that time away, that the energy and focus that you then put into that application the following morning is likely to be a lot higher than it is at the end of the day. And especially if you're in that mindset of, okay, just 5 more minutes, or I just want to get this done, because I suspect it's not for you. It's not just wanting to get it done. It's wanting to get it done to the level of standard that gives it the best chance of going through the process to get you the funding that you need. So I think that would be the logical response is, and I think probably you'll fight the logical versus the emotional part of, this, what the outcome is. And I think, interestingly, it's conversations that have come up with other people this week of taking the focus off of the outcome and into the process of what's needed for the best outcome. So I think it's very, a lot of us focus, don't we, on what we want at the end of it, whereas actually taking that step back and focusing on what we can do, what we can control, what we can contribute into the process, that's the bit that contributes to a successful outcome, rather than looking over the top of that and focusing on the outcome itself. But I think there's that, it's the reminding yourself of that, actually, if I step away from this, I can come back to it with a fresh pair of eyes tomorrow, some renewed energy, renewed focus, and that's probably going to put a better application in, which is more likely to have that success than fighting that end of the day fatigue and that pressure, because that's the other side of it, isn't it? It's that pressure to get it done so that you can switch off and go home, or it impacts the focus, I think, doesn't it? So
yeah, no, that's really good advice, actually. I think that's definitely something that I'll be taking on board.
And it's that we can't pour from an empty cup, and so your charity needs you in good health and with good energy to do that important role. So if you don't look after yourself, you can't go in and look after that role that you do. So it's a strange one, isn't it? Because we all like to think, in work, that we contribute and that we're of value, and we almost overdo that to the point where we put our own health at risk, which means we wouldn't be able to go in and do it anyway. So it's almost like, okay, if we just drop a gear here and take the pressure off a little bit and balance out, being able to do a good job and looking after myself in the process means that I can turn up every day for work. But if I don't do that, chances are I'm going to end up having to take some time off sick, and it leaves people short anyway. So it's an interesting one, isn't it? Seeing it a lot at the moment.
Yeah, no, I bet. I think, yeah, it is interesting. And I think it's positive in a way, because you need that enthusiasm and you need that drive and desire to actually want to raise the money, to want to make sure that the charity can be here. But actually, it is about balance, and you're absolutely right about you can't pour from an empty cup, in that it is very easy to get carried away. and actually not do a brilliant application at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the evening. Whereas if you looked at it afresh the next day, it could actually lead to something more positive. So no, that's really good advice. Kind of leading on from that, I find it really, really difficult to say no. Part of the reason I'm here, no, I'm kidding. But if there is an opportunity for anything, whether it's going on the radio, whether it's going to a talk, whether it's presenting at a networking group at 6 o'clock in the morning, I don't want to say no to any opportunity, because again, that could be the difference between raising a load of money for the charity and getting some amazing support or not. And I feel like I have to take every opportunity that's presented to me, which may not necessarily be the right thing to do. Do you have any suggestions on how to stop? I mean, I'm sure there's lots of people that struggle, that always say yes to everything. How can you stop? How can I stop? Or limit that?
So I think it's, again, it's a balance thing, isn't it? Because I think there's lots of advantages to saying yes. So I think the saying yes comes from two different places. I think saying yes helps to push us outside of our comfort zone and helps us to experience lots of opportunities that if we didn't say yes to, we would miss out on. And if we didn't say yes and our comfort zone didn't get bigger, then we would forever be held in the same place. So I think that's part of the challenge, isn't it? Is there's lots of benefits to saying yes. So whether it's personal growth, confidence, from your perspective, saying yes helps you to, put yourself in front of people where there's potential further opportunities. So I think there is a positive to saying yes, because you're putting yourself out there. But I think when it's when you're saying yes to somebody else that means you're saying no to yourself, or you're saying no to something that you feel is a priority, and then how you adjust and amend that, which I think is what that's the yes that you're talking about, is when you feel that it's saying yes to somebody else is saying no to something that is either important to you or is a priority in a bigger picture. And I think that's the challenge of the question that I ask myself, or the question that I think is often helpful, is if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? And then you've got an option A and an option B. I can do this or I can do this. Mm-hmm. And then that makes it a more conscious decision rather than on an automatic yes. So I think sometimes when we don't have something to compare it to, we don't have a decision. We just have something in front of us, and we can, especially if you're a very positive thinker, you see it as an opportunity. If you ask yourself the question, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? Then you have an option A and an option B, and then it's more of a conscious choice of what is best either for you or for the other things that are a priority. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question of the scenario you had in your head?
Yeah, no, I think so. Absolutely. It is hard. It's an ongoing battle. I think I found it even before I worked in the charity sector that I would say yes to things, when actually I didn't really know why I was saying yes to them at all, and I just ended up kind of bogged down with work, where I didn't really get anything from it. I just kind of felt put upon. So yeah. But no, that's
I think there's an element, the word people pleaser always comes up, or quite often comes up in these kind of conversations, because people don't always know what they want, and they don't have that option B, is that they'll do what pleases the people rather than looking at the bigger picture and looking at what might be the better choice, rather than the more emotional choice of happy.
Yeah. So slightly different topic now. We've both done our fair share of networking.
Okay.
And virtual networking in these current times. So whether it's online or in person, I do find that if I've had a bad day and I just don't feel like doing it, but I do join a networking session. It's really helpful to be around people, even if it is just on screen. So how do you stop your mood impacting your work?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think it also depends on whether you're an introvert or extrovert, of whether or not you energize around people or whether you energize on your own or in smaller groups. So I think just we on the Thrive program last night, we were talking about managing our response to things, and managing emotions was part of that, but also how we take control over our emotional response and then our emotional state, and how we can use what's around us to help to change that. So we're talking about how you might have an emotional response to something, but then you have control over whether or not you hold yourself in that state or whether you choose to feel something different. For me, it's music. Or a distraction. So I will quite often, if I'm feeling in a bit of a funk, I'll put some feel good, happy music on, music that I have memories attached to that make me feel happy, that make me feel kind of positive and that kind of bubbly mood. Or I'll just take myself off to go and do something different, something that needs my focus, so that it stops the conversation going on in my head and puts me into a different state. So I think that can be really helpful. I'm similar in that I'm although I work with people and I love working with people, I am an introvert. So if I've got days where I've got lots of clients or workshops and networking, I find like by the end of the day, I just, I can't even watch Netflix. I just need something that has no people, no voices, and I need that kind of almost complete silence to re-energize, which a lot of people find quite strange, because it's that the assumption or the interpretation that an introvert is somebody who doesn't like being around people. I love people. I just find it quite draining in that if I'm with people for long periods of time or big groups of people, I need to step away. So house parties, you'll always find to be in the smallest, quietest room rather than the big bubbly room. I like small and contained. But yeah, the days when I'm with lots of people, or if I've got certain clients that are quite intense sessions, then quite often I will leave this space. So I change my environment. I'll go and sit in a different room, and quite often just sit with Kindle or sit with a book, sit with music, and just completely take myself out of it, re-energize, and then come back into it. But there's a couple of things there. It's changing your environment. So just taking yourself out of the space that you're in, changing your physical state. So, staying sort of sat in front of the computer, just so taking myself off for a walk, or going and doing the washing up or putting the hoover around, something that changes my physical state, and then something that helps change my mental emotional state. So music or reading, or something that makes me or helps me to think about something else. So it's those three: mental, physical, and emotional, but an actual change that will help to change how I feel. So that's what works for me. And although it might not be the same activities, it's the same principle for most people. Change your physical state. So, quite often, when people talk about feeling stressed or they're feeling a certain way, it's held in their body language. So even sometimes just standing up from your desk and, like physically shaking it off and changing your physical state can make a big difference. Some people will go to the gym, some people will go for a walk. Some people go for a run, not sure why, but yeah, some people choose to do that. But even just things like music, it'll be different for different people. But it's finding what works for you, what helps you get from one emotional state to another. Is it what do you do? What do you do to help you? I mean, networking, depending on the networking event, that can help you change your state anyway. Especially the ones, the Thursday afternoon ones, which is very lively, very vibrant. It's quite hard to be in a room with lots of people who are laughing and joking, isn't it? So it switches your state quite quickly, but it's probably not how you want to show up. Do you almost want to switch it a little bit before, so that you don't show up in one state and then have to use that time to change over? So, I think that's good. I think for you.
Well, no, probably I don't. I think I just push myself to join those groups and hope that will change my state. Whereas actually, I think you've got a very good point about doing something before, like rather than getting to that point and being in the wrong mood for that situation. Actually, I'm going to try and do that more and go for a walk or do something to kind of reset how I'm feeling rather than just pushing on. But that Thursday one you talk about does help. I think that is just a really positive, inspiring group to be part of. And I've always heard about that thing of like radiators and drains. And I think that's definitely a room full of radiators. So
yeah. I think this is, it feeds into, take what you said then about taking a break rather than pushing through. I think we have, in the workplace, we have breaks for a reason. We don't have breaks built into the working day or into our contracts because our businesses want us to step away from work. It's not there because it's there. It's not there out of goodwill. It's there because people, businesses know that when people take a break, they come back and they're more productive and they get more from us. So it is really, those breaks are there for a reason. And it's, there's a lot of people who work through breaks by choice. They're contracted for a break, they're contracted for short breaks, screen breaks, lunch breaks, but choose to work through them. Whereas actually, we wouldn't have those contracted in if there wasn't a good reason for the business. And the good reason for the business is that we come back and we're more productive, they get more from us. But we need to take that break because we feel much better. Yes, there's a benefit for the business, but there's also lots of benefit for us as well, of just taking a quick walk around the block, or just going and changing your scenery, changing your space, lifting your mood a little bit, re-energizing and coming back into it. So kind of links back into the first question, really, of how can you get the best out of the work that you're doing, and what can you put in place to make sure that when you do sit down, you show up at your best. And taking regular breaks and re-energizing is a huge part of that.
I think that kind of answers my next question, because at the moment, myself included, lots of us are working from home. So some people, myself probably included, might struggle with that balance between work life and home life. So I was going to ask your suggestions about how you stop work taking over, because I know I find it very difficult a lunch break to actually step away. But I mean, I think that's kind of answered. So I'm going to throw in another question, just to ask, what makes you angry?
Ooh. See, this is an interesting one, because this comes up. So on the Speaking Academy that Nick Elston does, one of the questions is what, about things that make you angry, make you cross. And these are every month. So every month I'm faced with the same question, and I still struggle to think of things that make me angry. I'm not. I know this is coming. Why have I not prepared an answer? So I'm generally generally not an angry, it's not an emotion that you will see from me very often. You'll see frustration, and you'll see things that would or have the potential to make people angry. But I find for me, when I'm angry, it feels like that's somebody else. I'm not in control, if that makes sense. It's almost like it's not an emotion that is very easy to get from me, because it's not really something that I don't feel that it has. I'm tripping over my words here, but it's almost like I don't feel like that has any benefit to being angry. So then you might see a little flash of it, but it's not something you won't see me being angry for a long period of time. You might see a flash, and then quite quickly I'll find a different emotional response that's more helpful for the situation that I'm in. I think that's probably partly experience of being around people who are angry often, and seeing that it serves very little purpose. There's not very much that anger helps resolve. It normally, in my experience, aggravates the situation or makes it worse, rather than helps to resolve it. So I guess it's the experience. The years that I worked in the police, there were things that I felt angry about, but they didn't make me angry. Does that make sense? In that, when you're dealing with victims, or you're dealing with hearing about things that have happened, that hearing those things, I would feel angry about it, but I wouldn't be angry, because being angry about it didn't help. So it was almost as if, I was 18 when I started working for the police. So if I can't support a victim, or I can't help a witness if I'm in a particular emotional state. So I learned quite quickly to respond to certain things in a different way. So even though I might have felt a certain way about it, I learned to control and find an emotional response that was helpful to the person I was with. And it's similar in coaching. You detach and you distance yourself from what that person is feeling, so that you can support them. So if I felt what they felt, or if I felt a way about what they feel, I can't help them in the same way, because then my emotions come into the mix as well. So there's definitely things that really annoy me and really frustrate me. But it's really weird now. I can't think of anything. There's things that just really, that makes me sound like there's nothing in the world that doesn't frustrate me, which is not true at all, because there's always things. It's probably things like, but yeah, I genuinely can't think of anything. My mind's gone completely blank. I'm trying to think of the last time I felt angry about something. It's really weird, isn't it? It's that whole, I think, just understanding and always looking beyond, and looking for good intentions, and looking for reasons why that might have happened. And just that sort of, I think I've worked really hard to be very open to understanding things. And so I think that there's lots that goes on in the world that I feel angry about. Inequality, I feel angry that people should have to fight for their place in the world, or fight for the rights that other people so easily have that don't even need to think about. I get angry about, I feel angry about people who take advantage of vulnerable people. There's lots in the world that I feel really strongly about, but it's also then, what part can I play in helping to make that change and helping to make that difference? And being angry about it, it serves a purpose to a point, but it's not going to help resolve it. So it's all, I think, when I feel angry about something, I look at why I feel angry, and what can I do that will a difference to what I feel angry about, rather than why I feel angry. I don't know. I think I'm starting to waffle now.
I think I know what you mean. You want it to be, you want it to be productive. You don't want to just feel something without being able to have an impact on that.
Yeah.
No, I get that.
Yeah, and I think in my experience, seeing people who get very angry over lots of different things, I don't see that there is a purpose for their anger, in that anger doesn't help the situation. It might help highlight something because it creates attention, but anger very rarely solves or resolves. So for me, it's almost like, okay, what can I respect that people feel angry about it, but holding on to that anger very rarely helps resolve a situation. It normally has a negative impact on the individual who feels that emotion. Me, when I feel angry about something, I try and channel that energy into more, what can I do to help change the situation that I feel angry about, or have an impact, or what can I do that's more positive rather than that negative energy.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
That's such a good question. And knowing that there's another speaking academy coming up, and knowing that I'm going to have to answer this question again, I really do at some point need to sit down. I would say it's in inequality and things, you know, people taking advantage of people who are vulnerable. That I find that really yeah, that's anger, isn't it?
There we go. There's the anger. I knew there was something there somewhere.
I think it's more sort of, I think there's probably other words I would use to describe it, like frustration, or you know, there's other words that I would probably use over anger, but that it's the same kind of thing. Yeah. Good question.
Okay. So
is that your 5?
No, I think that was 4, wasn't it?
Okay.
I'm sure that was 4.
I'm not counting. I trust.
I've gone off script a little bit. I did have 5 planned, but I've gone a bit off tangent, because you answered some of them in other questions. But there was one more thing. So I think this is number 5. I don't think I'm taking advantage. So I always used to worry about absolutely everything. Like everything, world hunger, like world peace, everything. And someone once told me in a coaching session about the circle of influence and circle of concern. So about how things in the circle of influence you can obviously have an impact on, you can make changes, but the circle of concern, you can't do anything about them. They're just there. Just park them. Know that they're a concern, and just don't worry about it. And that advice for me was probably the best thing that I've ever learned, and I've shared it with everyone I possibly can, because it's just helped me massively in absolutely everything I do. If you could give one piece of advice to everyone, what would it be?
Oh, so that control circle of so I've used it as coming from circle of control, circle of influence, and that's come up a lot especially over the last couple of months with the pandemic and other things that have been happening. And that, you know, when you look at it on the surface, we can't control the pandemic, we can't influence what happens, but we can control certain elements within our own 4 walls and how we live and how we show up for ourselves daily. So there's certain things, you know, quite often we feel like we don't have any control, but quite often there are elements that we can take control of. So I think that's a great, and especially for anxiety and worry, that's such a good piece of advice. So one piece, and I think there's lots of things that come up on a regular basis with people that I work with. It's really hard to sum it up into one. I think probably what comes up more than anything else, and that kind of transfers over to lots of different situations, is things like is looking at chunking things down into that first step. So one of the things we talked about last night on the Thrive call was, what's the smallest action that you can take that will have the biggest influence? And we were talking about it in two different ways. One is like, what's the biggest stone that you can pick up that if you were to throw it into the pond would have the ripples that went the furthest? Or more like a domino effect of, if you were to knock over one domino, that would have that chain reaction of kickstarting lots of different things. And I think what comes up for me in terms of one piece of advice is, we quite often face that overwhelm, which goes with the worrying and the anxiety, doesn't it? If we see something or we have something that we have to work with or deal with, and it feels too much, it feels overwhelming. There's that whole, set goals that scare you. Well, that's great. But if they scare you and you never then do anything about it, there's not much point in setting the goals. But sometimes life puts things in front of us that feel big and scary and overwhelming. But when you chunk it down and you break it down into smaller pieces that you can work with, I think that's probably something that would go hand in hand with the piece of advice you've just talked about, in that just keep breaking it down until you've got small pieces that you can start to work on. You might hear, sometimes you hear it called about eating the elephant, of, you look at the elephant and you think that's impossible, but actually if you break it down into pieces, it is possible. So I think breaking things down into smaller chunks that feel manageable means that you're more likely to take those first steps. You're more likely to start taking action because it feels achievable, it feels manageable, rather than feels like very overwhelming, that looming thing that you need to deal with. So I think that's probably one thing that comes up in lots of different areas, and it comes up in lots of different ways. But things like just keep breaking it down until you have a piece that you think, okay, that I can do, that I can start with. And then once you've done that, then you can look at the next one and the next one and the next one. And eventually it starts to move you forward. I think that's certainly what comes up a lot, is when it feels too big and it feels overwhelming, taking that first step to start to manage it puts people into that state of fear, into the state of worry, into the state of overwhelm. And so then non-action keeps them safe and comfortable, and so they stay where they are. Whereas if you break it down into a smaller step, then you're more likely to take the action. And once you've started to take action, you feel more in control, and you start to see the things that you can control, and you start to see the things that you can influence, and you start to move forward. And I think sometimes feeling like you're taking action, feeling like you're moving in the right direction or moving in a direction, feels more is a more positive feeling, a much more positive emotion than feeling stuck, frustrated, overwhelmed, and feeling inaction. Does that make sense?
That's probably, it's probably really good advice at the moment as well.
Yeah, I certainly, the two examples, that was what came up last night. So taking the smallest action that has the biggest consequence, or taking the smallest action that leads to more action. So for some people, it is about taking one action that has that ripple effect across lots of different areas. So maybe it's just, the boundary of work and life at the moment. If you were to work on that, the ripple effect and the consequences that it would have, or the impact it would have, would be across lots of different areas: your personal life, your work life, maybe your physical health, maybe your mental health, maybe even your emotional health. So it's one action that has a ripple impact across lots of different areas. So you could look at it like that, or that domino effect of, okay, if I do this one thing, it will lead to the next thing, which will lead to the next thing, which will lead to the next thing, which will eventually knock the whole lot down and get you to where you want to get to. It's very similar, but not the same.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Good questions. So I wasn't keeping count, and I think only one person so far has only had their 5 questions, because I don't pay any attention. Maths has never been my strong point anyway, but I don't pay any attention to it at all. So does that?
I think
is
that
there
was
any
5.
other questions? Yeah, I think it was 5 too, and they were 5 good questions as well. Has it kind of brought up anything for you in terms of like things that you find helpful, or like anything that you think, okay, that's something I can take away?
Yeah, absolutely. I think definitely your key piece of advice of breaking something down into smaller chunks rather than seeing it as one big task, which actually, if you see it as a big piece of work or a big thing that you have to do, you're just going to put it off and you might actually never get to it. Whereas if there's smaller steps, then you can kind of put milestones in place and actually be a bit more targeted about it, and work better. And also in terms of stepping back and having some space and having that physical space and the changes as well. So yeah, there's a lot there that I'll definitely be on board.
Hopefully it's things that are useful to lots of people, so not just you in your role and your world, but for people in general. So thank you so much for bringing such great questions in. It always amazes me, like how many of these we've done. So I think your number maybe the 18th. We're getting near to 20, and that there's lots of questions coming through, which gives lots of information out there. So thank you so much for your time. I know you're incredibly busy, and so thank you for giving me your time and bringing such great questions in. I really appreciate it. So I will put links in of where people can contact you, or certainly find out more about the charity and the amazing work that you're doing, and if people want to support, how they can support the work that you do. So I know obviously within your role there's lots of initiatives going on at the moment of different ways that we can have some fun, and we can do things that it's not a big action for us, but has a real impact for you guys and the work that you do. So we'll put the links up so that we can see how we can get involved and how we can support. So this will go out, it'll be on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter and Facebook. So wherever you are watching this, when you're watching back, please do check out Amanda and the team at Children's Hospice Southwest doing amazing work. We'll put the links in so that you can find out more. And if you've got any questions, feel free to pop them into the comments section. I will keep my eye out and answer any questions, or you can contact me direct if you prefer. But thank you so much. Thank you, Amanda, for your time. Thank you, people, for watching, and we will see you all very soon.